This is a Baha'i Fireside, the purpose of which is to learn just a little bit about the Baha'i Faith, the world's latest revealed religions. And I just had a nice sitting in Seattle with my law clerk, Omar. As the judges came in to my chambers, just sort of say goodbye, because I'm not going to hear cases in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, sometimes Arizona, Hawaii. They said, you know what we remember most about you? In the words of judgment, it's your Baha'i faith. That is what I shall always remember. Well, that was very nice, because the Baha'i faith changed the life of my husband and me. And so, without imposing on my dear and wonderful friend, Mona, would you give the opening prayer, please?
O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to Thee. These hearts are radiant with Thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of Thy glad tidings. O God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to promulgate the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American nation is worthy of Thy favors and is deserving of Thy mercy. Make it precious and near to Thee through Thy bounty and bestowal.
Thank you very much, Mona. Well, we have known each other a long, long time. And in her work as a licensed marriage, family, and child counselor, specializing in the integration and application of psychotherapy and spirituality from a Baha'i perspective. She is the founder and president of the Center for Global Integrated Education. She designs and directs a spiritually focused empowerment program in a number of places, and transformative mediation trainings at a public high school in California. What I know about Keyvan, when somebody has a problem dealing with the family, the person they're referred to is Keyvan. But what a lot of people don't know, in earlier days, she served, well, in many places around the world. But William Sears was one of our most favored Baha'i teachers, a former sportscaster for the Philadelphia Eagles, who then became a very famous Baha'i. And his book, A Thief in the Night, has really brought many people to the faith as he gives the story of progressive revelation. Keyvan was his translator on many occasions in many foreign countries. So she had the bounty and the privilege of doing this. Her husband is a doctor. She has 3 amazing children. And is it 2 grandchildren?
4.
Oh, 4. Okay, but I haven't talked to you for a couple of days. It is always an honor and a privilege to have Keyvan Geula, to whom you shall now listen.
You know, obviously I am old, right? There comes with a lot of wondrous awarenesses, I think. And one of them is a constant thinking about what am I going to say when I get at the door in the next world. So I think I like to have this recorded so I can take the recording with me. As a Judge Nelson said that when I come in.
Don't slam the door.
Anyways, it's such a pleasure, Dorothy, to come here to this house where it has so many memories for me. Many of the years Jim and you both were sitting here, and now you're shiny sitting here, but still Jim is here. So it's a pleasure to be able to serve under the shadow of this wondrous, luminous, one of a kind, that there is not two of it in the world. So, and I know so many of you know that, who's sitting here, you know up close. I see heads going like that. So it's a wonderful shot, and I appreciate the opening that Dorothy gives, because I'm sure all of us we have a little angle of speaking about the faith, and it's nice to have the overview and someone like Dorothy, and because she lives and exemplifies every single word she says. And I want to thank Professor Babak over there, who's taping it. I have Baha'i students in Iran that my heart goes to them to teach them. I teach them psychology, but not just psychology, but try to teach them the integration of psychology and spiritual concepts and spiritual laws. I really consider them spiritual laws, because there are just as much that there are laws in the material world. We call them what? What do we call these laws in the material world?
The rules and regulations.
And?
Physics.
And, yes, it's science. Basically,
Oh,
science
yeah.
reveals and unfolds to us the laws of nature. And so we learn about the law of gravity, we learn about law of expansion and the heat and all of those things. And these laws don't really allow any exceptions. In fact, I remember that Jim flew airplanes, right?
Yes, he did. He was a pilot.
Exactly.
For fun.
Exactly. And my son, Nissan, is flying now, and he was telling Mom, I realized when I get up there, there's no way I can not remember every single law, because one little mistake and you're down, you know? So you really learn to respect the laws of nature when you are in that kind of place. I really think that there are spiritual laws. They're not tangible to us, and therefore it's very easy to have a blinder and just not even know anything about it and carry out our lives. But we do suffer the consequences of backbiting, looking at the negative of the others. We do suffer the consequence of not knowing how to negotiate and create unity and oneness. These are laws. And many others, which I love to go like an inspector into the Baha'i writings, in the Baha'i prayers, and pull out those laws, because all of a sudden my eyes see and say, oh, this is a law he's giving us. And one of them, of course, is the law of love and attraction of human heart to the divine. Many years ago, there was a research paper that came out called Hardwired to Connect. 3 major organizations in the United States joined together, among them one of the medical schools, to look at the situation of the youth in this country, and why, the question was at that time, now is worse, why 25% of our youth are sitting in the waiting rooms of the mental health professionals. So they did not know what was the reason. They said, well, the only way to know is to do a research on the subject. And as a result of that research, it became very, very clear and evident that 2 things for sure, that human beings are hardwired their brain to connect to one another. We need each other. That's why my students in Iran who cannot go to university, they're banned from going to university because of their belief. So therefore, they're sitting in the kitchens and they study out of their computers. When they get a chance, they say, "Oh, Keyvan, how much I wish I could go and sit in a university, in a classroom, where there will be students on this side and the students on this side, and a professor on that side, and I had a book that I could flip the pages, and I could talk to this person and could consult with this other person. I so wish I could have that experience." Well, because we are hardwired to connect with one another. But also this research made it clear that we are also hardwired to connect to God, or whatever it is that we call it, that Dorothy said. There is only one reality that we are all connected to it. We are drawn to it. In a way, this is the force that in it we seek and search our goodness, our humanity, our godlikeness. And then they came up with some other 10 categories, and one of them for me was very delightful to see the necessity of the interaction between generations. And we don't lump all the youth together and all the old people together, but we mix them together because there's a gaining of the wisdom and gaining of the strength. And in a sense that as human beings, when we look at an old person and a younger person sitting together and having fun and laughing and everything, you say, when I get old, I will be there too. It's wonderful, because we always put ourselves in the context of whatever it is that we see. The situation with the young people has gotten worse, because now we have 75,000 suicides last year. It was just amazing what we are going through. So I thought, what do I want to talk about? The question that my patients, my young patients, mostly ask me is about happiness. They want to know, how come they're so anxious? They want to know, how come they're so sad and depressed? They want to know, how come they're so worried? They want to know, why can't they get rid of these worrying thoughts? They want to know, how can they be happy? Do I always tell them, why don't you write me a page about the story, just briefly, so I know what is it that we're going to be talking about. And in that process of writing, they really become aware. It helps them to kind of crystallize what is it that they're looking at. So they come prepared, and I am prepared nice. Then I tell them, I want you to find a prayer. And if they're Baha'is, I said, I want you to look for it. Don't bring me some prayer that you'll be saying all the and now you don't even think about any words in there. I want you to look for a prayer where you find yourself and the issues that you're bringing to me addressed in that prayer, in your view. You bring it. And they say, okay, and they bring that. And I say, so we're going to meet. Sometimes it's on Skype because they're some other part of the world. Sometimes they're nearby, they come and see me. And then we start looking at it. And it's very amazing how much the issues of fairly healthy people are very similar. So the first question I want to ask you is the same, similar to that. So it was one thought, one identified thought that you had in your mind that you said, well, I'm going to go today to Dorothy Nelson's fireside. So basically an identified purpose, rather than, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going. Because you have a target that then you're seeking. That means that you're going to be finding. But if there's no target, you're going. You might hear something, but you might not hear a lot of things either. Because there is no target, no awareness. So I'm curious to know of all these wonderful souls who are sitting here. How many of you came and said, oh, you know what, I really want to find out about whatever. Any thoughts? Yes?
A different belief system,
Okay.
different than my own.
Okay. So that means that you know your own belief system really well.
Mm-hmm.
So that means now you can tell the difference. Okay, very good, thank you. Anybody else? Yes?
Reinforcement and strengthening the current belief system.
You want to reinforce your current belief system. Reinforce. Yes.
I'm a Baha'i too. To experience the oneness and not draw lines, but to see the beauty in every person.
Okay, very good. And yes?
Learn something new each time you come.
Okay.
I thought one factor.
Okay, something that you say, oh, aha, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Anybody else? Okay, yes.
To learn more about the faith of Baha'u'llah and to enjoy the fellowship.
Okay, very good. Always there's room to learn. It's the ocean. Anyone else? I don't want to miss. Okay. Yes.
Well, this is,
Louder?
for me, it's, when my battery's low, this is where I can get recharged.
Okay. Very good.
And it's
Yes.
been, well, everyone's saying, where have you been, where have you been? Because I haven't been here in, what, 6 months? So, yeah, my battery's down to like 1 bar. So here I am.
This is the charge station.
Yeah, this is the charge station, this is the charge station.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you so much. Now what I want to do is, I was at a wonderful gathering this past Saturday at another wonderful Baha'i friend who is from China, Dr. Dinjo Kuri. Last I remember she served as the chancellor of all the community colleges of California. And then she decided, that's too much politics in that. I want to go and just do something which is service. And so she has created a PhD course that she mentors PhD students from all over the world, especially from China. But her issue is how to introduce the concept of spiritual education in the system of the Chinese, and that is not easy. Mm-hmm. And we have had scholars who come and they enjoyed the program we were doing at the public school, but they said, oh, we wish we could do that, but that's not possible. So she has these conversations on once a month called Spiritual Conversation. So I was one of the panel, there was a superintendent and there was a educational advocate on schools about how to present religion in public schools so it doesn't become like going to a museum and looking to odd stuff, you know. That has been my experience. World religion, when you go and speak to them, okay. But what was interesting is this search for integrating what is spiritual, how do we understand that, and how do we incorporate it in our life, and so many different views. And I came across, heard the word from one of the wonderful young Baha'is that some of us know and adore, Ruhiya Yol, who's an African-American young woman educator, and she spelled out the word spiritual pedagogy. No, we don't have that word in our schools. We don't even think about it, but there is such a thing as spiritual pedagogy. So I thought I would like to do an exercise that I did with my students, and that is, I put a word in here, and you tell me what comes to your mind, okay? So the word is going to be, and you can read it, right? This word, by the way, was mentioned 38 times in a very, very small article from Abdul Baha in 1800s, when he was asked to write by his father, Baha'u'llah, asked to write something about spiritual civilization. So in that Secret of Divine Civilization booklet that you can find it online, Abdul Baha mentions the word happiness 38 times. It is unheard of from the context of religion that pay attention so much to the inner emotional state of human beings. So we ask ourselves, am I happy? And we ask each other, are you happy? Parents ask their children, are you happy, my beloved? They ask their spouses, are you happy? And this whole condition of being interested in the emotional state of one another. And that's why, as Dorothy mentioned, Abdullah would walk in here and say, are you happy? And if you're not happy today, when are you going to be happy? And just knowing the whole art of how to be happy and what is being happy. So what I would like to hear from you, you tell me, what words come to your mind when you hear the word happiness? What comes to your mind?
Joy.
Joy? Okay, I'm going to just write it down here.
Peace.
Peace?
Contentment. That's my word.
Contentment? Okay.
Well-being, justice,
Well-being. Please never mind my bad handwriting, but you guys can read it.
justice,
Justice,
Trust.
trust,
Love.
Love is the most important.
love,
Faith.
faith,
Unity.
unity,
Patience.
Service.
service,
Freedom.
Patience, yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
freedom,
Patience.
patience. My goodness, you're pretty good. You guys are generating though. Okay, what else?
Nurturing,
Nurturing.
Fulfillment.
What was it?
Fulfillment.
Fulfillment.
Sunshine.
Present.
Sunshine.
Oh.
Pregnant. Is that what it was?
Present, like to be present.
Present. I thought it was pregnant. I thought, well, yeah, why not? A lot of people can be very happy because they're pregnant. Okay, present.
Recognition.
Recognition.
Wisdom.
I feel like I'm passing a spelling test. Wisdom. Wisdom.
Love of nature.
Serenity.
Love of nature.
Health,
What was it?
Health.
Health. Okay.
serenity,
Serenity.
Test and difficulty.
Test and difficulties.
debatable.
Okay.
Prayer.
Prayer. So again, what comes to your mind when you think happiness?
State of bliss. State of bliss.
State of bliss.
Laughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laughter.
Community.
Community.
The basic core of conscious knowledge.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's the core.
Okay.
No matter, you can be happy no matter how
It's not a
afflicted you
debate.
are.
Okay.
I know, I can't do this.
Just a word.
Basic core of
I just
conscious
think,
knowledge.
no matter what, you could be suffering, but that deep abiding joy of knowledge of God.
Okay. If you compare this early stage with later on, you see a unfolding of some aspects that are not so immediate and are not so just word, the deeper inner state of human soul. But what I'm noticing here, by the way, is that you still did not address some of the issues that the youth bring to me.
Oh.
One of them, which was last night actually, was anxiety, panic attack, fear of death, PTSD, which is a lot related to death, basically. Fear of death, death itself, having seen death, facing death, not understanding death, questioning death. How do I die? Where is it that I'm going? What does it look like? Is it going to be a dark place? Is it going to be a really everything shut down? Questions about death. He had to come with a prayer, by the way, to start the whole session. And it was very interesting that this prayer that he had chosen had a lot of concepts about life after, who we are and where we're going and that kind of thing. So what comes to mind is the ability to go so forward that you can also look back and have a hindsight. So how many people here in this room have had situations where they had the relief, the ahas of hindsight about anything, just hindsight. So I'm curious to know about some of the young people and the hindsight. Do you remember what was a hindsight?
I think just things relating to like childhood, being put in certain situations, and at the time thinking that, you know, viewing myself as a victim, but in hindsight, kind of reframing how I relate to that experience and kind of connecting to the strength that it gave me and my ability to then empathize with others.
Wow, okay, very good. So I'm going to take that because what we're talking about is when things go against our will, against our wishes. And which is very interesting because that is the moment that we have to decide, am I a victim? And why me? What am I supposed to do? Is this supposed to be a bad thing that happened to me? Did I do a mistake that I'm here at this juncture? And all those questions come on one side. And here it is what Baha'u'llah tells us in this wonderful book called Seven Valleys. I would really recommend any of you can get your hand on it. It's a mystical journey of human spirit to God, basically. So in this story, Baha'u'llah talks about hindsight. And I can tell you with my children, Dorothy referred my children, they have been persevering individuals and as a result successful, but my goodness, we had to consult and really visit a lot of hindsight according to the writings of Baha'u'llah, because otherwise there were times that we had no idea this was a bad or was a good thing. I'm just giving you one example. My older daughter, who's an upper torso specialist in radiology, now was in her residency at University of Arizona and just had applied to the same university and she wanted to continue right there. She was very happy. And 1 month before she had to start the program, the whole department fell apart.
Wow.
Everybody left. She was like, what happened? It's just 1 month left, and where am I going to go? All the positions are taken all over the country. There's no place will accept me. And that could be very true. So we had to consult. Let's see what is it that we can learn from here. So Baha'u'llah in these 7 valleys talks about man's journey towards God and what are some of the steps or some of the elements that you need to have part of your bag. Talks about this fascinating, legendary lover. His name was Majnoon. Those of you who know Arabic, you know Majnoon is what?
Crazy.
Crazy to the max. And their poems in Persian, Man ke Majnoon tuam, I am the crazy about you, that kind of a thing. And so Majnoon is in love with this woman whose name is Layli. And Layli could be doing no wrong. She is so loved by Majnoon. But Majnoon cannot find Layli because Layli is nowhere to be found. And he's not eating, he's not shaving, he just withering away. Well, after a while of not eating or not doing anything, he decides maybe he needs to get out one more time and look around for Layli. So he comes out and he starts digging in the ground. And somebody comes and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm looking for Layli. And they say, well, Layli is not under the ground. He says, I'll look everywhere. So this one day he comes out and because he looks so bad, 2 watchmen spot him and they say, this guy doesn't look good and he must be up to some trouble. So they start approaching him to arrest him. And Majnoon looks at them and they say, oh gosh, they're coming after me. How come they don't realize I got no energy, I haven't eaten for such a long time, I cannot really defend myself. But he realizes that if he doesn't run fast as he can, they're not gonna be listening and they're gonna arrest him. So he starts running. And he is surprised how much he can run. I don't know how many of you have ever had the situation where there was a fear or something like that, and then you discovered second wind in yourself to do whatever. So he starts running and they're chasing him and he's thinking himself, how cruel is this God, whoever it is, he doesn't see me being so weak, and he's sending these 2 angels of death after me. And he sees himself as a victim, as the worst victim in the world. Mm-hmm. He's angry, he's mad, he's all of those. Well, not just that he was running and he comes across a big tall wall. Now he doesn't know what to do and he's looking back and they're catching up with him. And he has one choice and that is scaling that wall. And he's tall. He said, well, he attempts and he scales the wall beyond his belief and he jumps on the other side. And there is Layli with a lantern in her hand, looking for her ring in the garden. He just can't believe it because there was no way he would run that fast. He would scale the wall like that ever if there were no those 2 watchmen chasing after him. He turns around and says, they were not the angels of death, they were Gabriel, thank you God. And Baha'u'llah says, if man could only see the end at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah. But you see, to see the end at the beginning, you have to have a vision.
Yeah.
You have to be wondering about things. You have to be wanting something. If you're not really, really loving something and willing to pay a price for it, there is no hindsight. There's no excitement. So my daughter Nevar, she was so badly, intensely focused on having a fellowship, and now it was stopped. And so she was really searching everywhere. And as a result of that, we talked about it. We said, let's calm down and let's open the windows for the watchmen. They need to come in, and let's trust that there is a loving hand in whatever it is that is happening. And that relationship that you would say is a loving hand, not a punishing hand, must be part of the picture, must be part of the process, must be part of the experience. That we don't only trust our own self. Because that whole notion of, oh, you just trust yourself is just a bunch of because we look at the whole situation of Abdul Baha. He says, he calls himself in this prayer, this is a broken winged bird. Abdul Baha suffered his life, most of his life in prison. He's developed so many muscles, spiritual muscles, to persevere, to stand, to be firm, to be loving, to be kind, to be happy despite all of that. And yet he still calls himself, this is a broken winged bird. And then you have to say, okay, so what is he going to do, a broken winged bird? And he says, and its flight is very slow. Okay, so what are we doing? And then he says, assist him. Send me your wind. Send me your wind. Assist him so he can fly to the apex of prosperity and salvation. So we don't do much good to ourselves if we only rely on our own self. Because guess what? We got two selves. And really exploring and applying this wonderful concept in my work for many, many years. The more I use it, the more I become convinced how much it helps me to bring in and integrate the writings of Baha'u'llah, the words of Baha'u'llah, and the writings of Abdul Baha, and this whole system of psychotherapy and psychology. So here we have our sense perception. And Dorothy, I'm going to be relying on you to give me a 5-minute heads up, so I will wrap it up when I don't go beyond time.
You have a 5 minutes head up. But we will go on, it's 5 to 9, and we generally break at 9.
Okay.
But we can go to 9:05. But I wouldn't go much beyond that, because I think people need to get up and stretch.
I'm glad I asked you. So sense perception, basically relying on our physical forces, and that is never correct, so we know that. The feelings that we have, the intentions that we have, and the actions that we take. And here is the most fascinating part. It is the way we think about what we see that makes us distinct. Whatever it is that happens in the world, every person has a unique way of thinking about it. And that's what creates the differences in opinion, the differences in the way we see. One person sees things Fox News way, the other one sees CNN ways, whatever it is that we do. And we cannot just come together because we each have a different way of seeing. But neuroscience tells us when we entertain a thought, it's not just that we entertain the thought, but we rewire our brain according to those thoughts. So whatever we are exposed to constantly, it basically perpetuates our way of looking at life. So religion becomes a most important factor in the way we rewire our brain, because we approach it with a great deal of open-heartedness. And what psychology never even addresses is the role of the heart, this part. I just was studying this wondrous tablets of Baha'u'llah from the Book of Certitude, Kitab-e-Iqan. about tablet of true seeker. Who is a true seeker? What is the condition of a person who really wants to know, like a scientist, like someone who does research? What are the qualities that we need to possess in order to be able to really not be veiled by our own biases, love or hate, or all of those things that stops us from going further? So I just want to finish with this, that at the center of our reality, believe it or not, we have two selves. One is the Darth Vader and the other one is the Luke Skywalker. So we gotta ask ourselves every moment and every chance, who is it that is sitting behind the wheel? When somebody says something, is it our Darth Vader who comes and says, no, what do you think you're doing? You're telling me that. So reaction, opposition, getting angry, getting mad, whatever. Or showing our godlike qualities. But where do we go to find those godlike qualities? Who's got the map? Who's got the recipe? And this young man, by the way, said, well, you know what, I am a Baha'i anymore because I am going without with friends and we are, drinking and a little bit of marijuana and stuff like that, but my goodness, it's causing me tremendous amount of anxiety. So, and death, I'm so afraid of that. So I asked him, I said, where do you want to go to find about death? Do you have somebody who can show you? And he said, but I remember some of the Baha'i prayers that I have read before or heard. They have something in there. I said, okay, go find me one and tell me what you find in there. So we started really looking at one of the Baha'i prayers for the dead, because in there we are wishing for the one who's gone certain conditions, right? That God forgive them, immerse them in a sphere of light. All of a sudden now we see a clue, a world that has certain requirements that you cannot find in Home Depot. But you gotta build it. And then I told him, you don't need to make yourself a pest and go ask for these answers, because if you're just easy, giving up, you're not gonna get it. I really think that the most important question in happiness is, which part of us are we acquiescing? And do we know the difference? Do we have the discretion? Have we experienced coming from this place and coming from that place? And do we keep an account of that? And do we move towards our successes? Because Baha'u'llah says, you don't want to focus on your negative. You can bring yourself into account, but you need to focus also on the strength that you have. And then Abu Baha mentions, he says, it's impossible to be happy in this world if you cannot live at the same time in this world and the next. Impossible. Because always you'll be wondering about the dangers of death, and that's where panic attack, anxiety, all of those things. So I want to stop right here. I'm hoping that you guys have lots of good questions, and then we can dive and explore and see which one of them we can find answers.
Thank you.
Well, Keyvan, the best thing about your job is that you live close by, and that we can continue this discussion again in the near future. She is a true teacher, and believe me, if you go to Iran and know people who have watched her videos, she is a lifesaver. They're not permitted to go to university, but they've got Keyvan.
Do you think that that as an individual, progresses in life and just kind of experiences more and more, that anxiety just naturally starts to dissipate, and that they have this better relationship between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, as the metaphor you mentioned, or do you think it's like a natural progression that people start to be able to kind of differentiate and choose which side they focus on, or is it something that is you constantly have to work at it, or both, a combination of both?
A very good question. In learning about material world, we do accumulate wisdom based on consequences. So open up the lid of something which is boiling, and the steam hits your face, boy, you learn the consequence. You're not gonna go open that lid anymore. But the spiritual world does not have very obvious consequences until we get to the next world, actually. Sometimes spiritual world has consequences of relationships. Like someone who is depressed all the time or anxious all the time, and they're paranoid now about all the time. People who are around them, they feel the pain. I mean, they don't want to ride with that person, so they might start taking distance, and that's where we go into divorces and stuff like that, or somebody gets fired because they don't see the consequences. They keep coming late and they don't see the consequences. And so, to the spiritual laws, I would say, unless you have a mentor and a teacher and a guide and a map, you are not going to be discovering it. That's why I think that God has sent his teachers in the temple of man. And otherwise, he could have dropped a book from up there and said, voila, go read that. In all languages, actually. but it comes in a relationship. Because there needs to be a attraction between the mentor and the mentee. You need to feel respect and love and all of that to be able to open your heart. Because that's why we say in therapy, we say the relationship of the therapist and the patient are at the heart of what you can do to make a difference. But who is that therapist? I'm sorry, I go sitting along with a whole bunch of my colleagues and I say, who would I be going to if I have a problem? I don't know. Because in my field, majority of people don't even know, don't even include the whole notion that we have two parts to us. Most of the time, therapy at this time addresses the Darth Vader. You have a problem, did you do something wrong, somebody did something wrong to you. Okay, so never they look at their strength, or what is a strength? What is perseverance? Or even the subject of death. It's just like, you don't even take that to any therapist, that I'm afraid of death. So therefore, I think when we are having the question of panic attack, which is about death, because the person is feeling, oh, I'm driving and I might die any moment. And so you got to know how to become curious about death rather than furious.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Omar.
Okay. So when we were talking about words for happiness, there was something that came to mind, but I was a little embarrassed to say it. But as I thought about it more, it was one of the things that came to mind was individualistic. So am I happy? Or this idea of the pursuit of happiness, and it's so it can become self-centered and self-absorbed. And then someone talked about, I think Craig earlier talked about coming here for fellowship, right? And how to create happiness through togetherness.
But what comes to your mind when you think about a person who on their own become happy? I mean, this is a good place to go, the action.
Yeah.
What is it that this person is doing that the outcome is that they feel happy? Or what is it that they are thinking that they are feeling happy? So that's the question that you have to come up. So let's say a person is going for a walk in nature. That's an individual thing. And they look at the sun and they look at this reflection of the sun on the leaves and the shining of the leaves and the birds flying and the chirping. Is that kind of a self-centeredness, or is that kind of a solitude and a reflection and a communication with the part of themselves that comes from here? So which one is it? And what's wrong with that? In fact, if you don't have this kind of a interaction and reflection, we just don't have room for this relationship that might appear in the relationship with other people. Because coming out of there with other people, it is an inseparable relationship.
Thank you.
My friend Mohammed just came back from Iran. How do you communicate with people in Iran?
One of the things which is very important as a teacher, you have to build a relationship, and that means that we need to see each other's face. When I do therapy, I cannot do therapy on the phone with somebody when I cannot see, because it's impossible. Because 75% of your communication is the body language. Baha'is of Iran are living in danger all the time, you know. Somebody said to Abdul Baha, we are very worried about you, Abdul Baha, because he was in prison. 2 governments were after him. And he says, you know, for all my life, people have been sending me darts and swords and everything like that. And he said, don't worry, I am surrounded by a crossing of all the kind of swords around me that no more swords can come in. Don't worry about it. But at the same time, I see depression, I see post-traumatic stress, I see lack of enthusiasm anymore. They don't want to study because they cannot get a job. So why would you go through all years of studying if you can never find a job? A lot of them love to work with children, and I understand it because children are innocent, and they are the only group that they don't subjugate them to some kind of interrogation. You know, they're open-hearted to them. But now they're passed a law that nobody from a minority religion can teach children.
Oh.
That's true. That's what I was trying to say.
Whatever brings them
Just came back.
satisfaction, they block it. You know, because the purpose is to suffocate and decapitate,
The young
and the
people,
enemy is
especially.
big and has power. So what do? I mean, really, you gotta have a tremendous inner strength, but that is too much. There must be things that we can do that opens windows for some of them who can continue their education outside.
Yeah, I want to take up where Omar left off. I'm thinking that, if I'm wrong, Omar, tell me, okay?
Okay.
He will.
That there's a kind of there's a kind of false happiness that just has to do with fulfilling one's
Right.
own desires.
Right.
And I think the key to the answer is what you said in the beginning, we are connected together. And true happiness cannot come about just by oneself. It takes service to others, loving others, being loved by others, all of these qualities, because there's a selfish kind of happiness too, you know, which means that, boy, it'd make me really happy to take his food.
Well, you see, that's where we come from, our material self.
Yes,
See, the material self is if I have more, you have less. That's a material self. If I drink more of the water, you're gonna have less of the water. But the spiritual self is completely different. The spiritual self multiplies as you share. You have to have the discretion to know the difference between the two. So in our conversation, I should be okay to love my spiritual self, actually, because that means that I am loving part of me that is godlike and is going to be there for the good of all humanity.
Yes.
So this discretion is necessary. Otherwise, our words are going to be very confusing.
Yes.
You know, words like, okay, trust your own self. What's it?
Yeah.
You know.
Who said that?
Because then you hear Abdul Baha says, not everything that a man loves is good for him. And then we read in the long obligatory prayer, fascinating passages. For example, every day you're saying these obligatory prayers, say, O God, do not look upon my hopes and my doings, nay, rather look upon thy will that has now. Why is it that has encompassed the heavens and the earth? That means this is the will that can see and encompass all the worlds and is not biased in little teeny little corners and stuff like that. So then discretion between me and my small me, that only I see this much, but then who is the vision that sees all creation? And then you are going to ask about what is the meaning of good. And Abdul Baha says, yeah, do you know what is the meaning of good? And then you got to go find out what is good and what is not good. These are critical thinking questions. Nobody teaches anybody. You got to go learn it.
Oh, I don't know, who was first, John or Al?
Okay,
Yeah.
All right,
all right.
John.
Does it matter what point each of those is? Does it matter, does it make any difference that senses are on top or feelings are on the bottom or?
Not necessarily, this is not linear, but generally because we are material being and our senses is the first point of our connection with the world, we tend to be influenced by what we see, what we hear, what we touch, generally this is more present for us from the very, very beginning. But this can cause a certain way and patterns of thought. And when we develop these patterns of thought based on what they're bringing us up, whatever it is, then we can also produce certain patterns of feeling. And then based on that, we take decisions. So you're sitting in a gathering, and then there's a whole lot of people. And then somebody around the table, somebody is smiling at you, and you happen to be a woman. You feel what? What would be one common feeling you have if somebody across the room is smiling at you? Happy. And then what do you want to do?
Smile back.
Smile back. And what would be your action?
Smile.
Okay. Is it possible that another person sitting in the same room and they feel uncomfortable?
Yes.
And why would they feel uncomfortable? It's the same smile producing happiness in somebody else, but then you're feeling uncomfortable. We have to ask why? Why?
So the action is the last part of the.
Because of what? Because of the way we think about it. And that's what Baha'u'llah came to really rewire the way we think about it. That's why the words of God means a great deal today. Otherwise, we would be thinking the way we thought, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and they are not going to be nice patterns of thought, because we had the tribal civilization, we had a limited way of looking at each other, we had all kinds of biases, and we can kill each other if we look at each other with that kind of patterns of thought. We had the sense of, I need to take care of me, who are they, that kind of a thing. That does not fit anymore in this frame of existence. So this is the key. And that creates basically an elevated thought translated into action, really brings us closer to this reality in us. It's supposed to.
Al was next, and then.
Well, based on what Omar was saying about individualism, I went to a completely different space. I mean, we're born alone. We die alone. I mean, there may be people around us, but we're on our own on that sense.
Physically.
Physically, yes. And Baha'u'llah warns us that we should look with our own eyes at a situation rather than the eyes of another. And just don't take what they're telling us for gospel or the truth, but to investigate for ourselves, as we have independent investigation of truth. And as Dorothy always mentions, we don't have clergy. This is one of the reasons we don't have clergy, because Baha'u'llah recognizes that the spiritual journey is our individual journey. At the same time, the writings are also clear, we can't do it on our own, as you mentioned. I mean, this is why, as you said, the prophet comes in the form of a man. But also, the thought is, like you said, everyone has a different perspective based on their consequences and experience that have shaped their way of thinking. So all of us are thinking about what you're saying in a slightly different way. So I always thought this tension between community and individualism creates, it creates a creative tension, because we always have to figure out, like, how to, I'm my own person, I have to take care of my own needs, but I'm part of a community, and I have to care about people, and the writings teach us how to act towards people, and it's like, it's always empathy, kindness,
And loving thy neighbor.
loving thy neighbor, golden rule. So,
But yet at the same time, there are times that the person next to us that is sharing their thoughts is going in that direction. And then so you want to, that's why Baha'u'llah says, you need to take responsibility for the way you think. So every day we go visit our thoughts and we bring it close to the writings, and we see if we are able to be part of the divine orchestra or not. Because if we make our own tune, the tune is so far away from the divine orchestra, then you're not going to be part of it. And because you're created to be connected, you want to be in line. So therefore, again, the word becomes very important. Allowing that word to rewire us. Because otherwise, other people's words and other parts of the world rewire us, and we got to choose who should be rewiring us.
One of my questions was, I don't know, for if you have like a good intention regarding like a situation that you've been in, but the action is something that you may know is not good, like how, are there any in the chart ways, like, is it going back to, like you said, the word or thought, like you have a good intention, but then the action is hurting somebody?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Someone.
I'll give you a story. So this guy decides that he's gonna go on a journey. And as halfway through the journey, a bear comes to him, by the way, this is Rumi's story. A bear comes in his direction and he says, I wanna travel with you, could you take me as a friend?
Yeah.
Well, you have to remember the symbolism of the bear and the man, basically these two. so they go half the way and the man becomes tired and he says, I'm gonna take a rest. The bear said, well, don't you worry, I'm strong, I'm big, I can take care of you. He's got good intention, right? So man lies there and he sleeps and he's snoring and everything, and the fly comes, sits somewhere on his head, and the bear looks like fly and says, "Come down, fly." He's getting upset. He wants to shoo away and go like that. Anyway, the fly keeps going, whatever, and every time it comes, the bear is getting more serious thinking. And he's feeling a lot more than being frustrated. Now he's angry and furious. And now he wants to really, really rescue his friend. The last time, the fly comes and sits right there. And the bear now has a big boulder in his hand, and he's strong, and he means well, and he loves his friend, and he goes, whoop, to kill the fly, of course, Who's there? So the intention, good intention, it means who is it that is having good intention? And then what kind of action comes out of that good intention? And the other thing is, whole notion of good or bad is something that has to do with a collective conversation. And so, like, for example, you can never come close enough to good or truth without consulting with God, with wise people, and having at least some sort of a consensus that this seems to be good, so let's do this. But then keeping your mind open that let's do it, let's take action. But if the action did not produce a good result for everybody to benefit, let's go back and to the drawing board and then reconsider and have another consultation. That's why Dorothy, the whole concept of mediation, conflict resolution, consultation, is the only channel in this world that any of us can come close to the truth. Even on the meaning of the writings of Baha'u'llah. I have a way of looking at it, the tablet of the truth seeker. She has a way of understanding it. Dorothy has a way of, we need to be open to each other's the diversity of point of views, not to force it on one another. Never, never say, you need to understand it this way. This is what it's saying, that's not. So Baha'u'llah has given us that fascinating gap. He says, I give you the authoritative writings, but you are never the authority. You can only share your thoughts with humility and let everybody else look at it. And if you guys come up to a conclusion, a decision, okay, fine, we'll take action. But never, never, never think that you can understand the divine because you are not. So, and she asked me about the sin. The sin means basically that we are imperfect. We have our limited veils and all of those things. And we have to be humble and we have to allow others to influence us. In marriage, they say one of the most important factors of a happy marriage is men allowing their women to influence them. It's the research. It's the research. There are reasons for it. There are reasons for it because women by nature are a lot more intuitive, they're a lot more collaborative, that's a form of feminine qualities. Everybody has masculine and feminine qualities, but women supposed to have a little bit more of the feminine qualities, and that is necessary for a peaceful environment, which is marriage, It's not about who's right or who's wrong, it's about can we walk in harmony.
Yeah, returning back to this idea of pattern of thought. So like when you gave the example of someone smiling across the room and, depending on your pattern of thought, you may view it as an invitation, like a positive interaction or a negative interaction.
Yes.
So if we think of it like in the kind of the Hobbes versus Locke terms of like people are innately good versus innately evil, how do we strike the balance between, thinking the best in people, but then at the same time also protecting ourselves? So like for example, if I'm driving at night on the freeway and someone's on the side of the road, as a female, my first reaction is I want to help, but I'm scared, right? Like I want to protect myself. So how do we strike that balance between?
That's called wisdom.
The police.
Yeah. How do you get wisdom?
This whole notion that we are created innately one way or the other, it needs to be taken with a grain of salt. All of us as human beings, we can learn, we can grow, we can develop, we can appear in the utmost beauty. We need education, and a good education. The kind of education that comes from school, that's not education, that's instruction, that's an information dispensation. But when we go ahead, and Dorothy mentioned the hidden word, Baha'u'llah says in hidden word, see no evil, hear no evil. Which means what? Which means this is a will. You are willing to see evil. You're willing to focus on the negative, and you can be willing to look at the positive. Well, that is in the context, let's say in a marriage. Actually, research tells us one of the criteria of a good marriage is that the woman and the husband look at each other and they say, oh, he's so cute. And somebody else might walk and say, oh, he's such a jerk. That is because one decides to look at the good and one learns not to look at the good. And a lot of elements can interfere with that. For example, if a person is hungry, thirsty, tired, whatever, it's a lot likely that they would be naggy or stuff like that. But I would say that is not yet a pattern of, that ongoing. But someone who is depressed, generally they see cup half full. And depression is contagious. You don't want to be around somebody like that because it affects you. So then, what do? Are you going to stick around for your whole life? Well, be my guest if you can do it and stay positive. But you have to set the limit somewhere and say, okay, am I becoming contaminated myself? Am I becoming influenced by this environment myself? Then you need to pull yourself out of that environment. But if you can be walking with the sharks and never believe, be my guest. I tell you something, one day they invited me to teach a whole community. And there was this person who walked in there, and he was acting a certain ways, and I said to myself, oh God, please never send this person to my office. I don't ever want to do anything. It doesn't matter how good I am, I just don't want to do it. And then one day this person appeared in my door. I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, I had to learn to be of help to him. I had to learn to be patient. I had to learn to see the positive and the strength of this person, because that was the only way I could help him. I could not be stuck on my own fear and biases and whatever it is, and I had to learn not to be affected by the whatever that was coming from this person. So the key is, which direction is the balance going? Is this direction for everybody, or in that direction? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
On that high note, knowing that we're going to have Keyvan back, will you join me in thanking this extraordinary?